Longer than expected, I fumbled to find the answer button. Eyes still fixed to the darkness. I hit answer and managed to struggle out of help. This house was walking distance to the office, so it wasn't long before my colleague arrived to check up on me. As soon as I heard his voice call out my name, I felt the weight lift immediately, and I cried out his name in response. I ran downstairs to meet him, and the music returned far too loud, which gave us both a bit of a shock. We both got out of there, and not even checking if the door was locked properly. It was one of those Yale locks that auto-lock when you pull them, so it was fine. We headed back to the office. On the walk back, I noticed a pain shooting across my neck though, and when we got back to the office, I checked to see 3 long scratches running diagonally across my back. This made absolutely no sense to me. I explained what had happened to the others in the office, and my manager told us that she had had a similar feeling when she met the landlord, maybe because she was with someone. It wasn't as scary. But after that, we made sure that whenever we visited that property that we were always accompanied. I'm not sure what actually happened to that house in the end. Surprise, surprise. We struggled to find people who could live in that bad vibe house, and the landlord gave it another agent to try and sell. In the end, not long after, I moved to another company as well and onto other properties, which I was grateful for. Like I said, I've had other experiences too, but this was definitely the scariest and perhaps the strangest too, with the scratches appearing just like that. Maybe one day I'll share the other stories if people are interested. But in any case, thanks for listening. Music during the fires that consumed Mount Charleston, Nevada. My parents drove out to the mountain when the roads were clear. They described the wildlife to be running around the car as they drove through the open road. My dad told my mom to stop the car, and he got out and started walking through the desert. He realizes that the wilderness is running, including snakes and other deadly animals. He also witnesses what looks like a moose or an elk in the distance that was looking at him, walked off in the direction of the rabbits and other wildlife as he gets in the vehicle. Though both my parents and his father describe seeing a tall man crouched in front of the car, all of a sudden wings draped over his back as he stands and faces them. His wingspan was wide, enough to cover the entire 2-lane road. He then lifted off of the ground in 4 swooshes. They described him as muscular 6 or an 8-pack, broad shoulders, arms and legs. But the face was apparently mesmerizing. They said that it was hard to describe his face, but it wasn't human based on what they said. It sounded a lot like a man-bird. The Mothman was a topic of discussion for them to decide if it was the Mothman. So I guess it probably resembled something like this. If anyone has had any similar stories about this creature or from this area, then please do share it with me, because I really want to try to understand exactly what they say they saw. This happened when I was 16, maybe 17, in the woods of Leelanau County, Michigan. So I was on vacation with family in northern Michigan when we visited a family friend who had lived in the center of the county in a dense forest. I remember when we pulled up the road the house was on was a gravel road instead of a paved road. Remember looking down the gravel road and seeing it go down a hill and turn to the left in the forest. A few hours passed by, and I decided to go and check out where the gravel road went. I remember feeling extremely nervous because we were in black bear country, as I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago and never really experienced bears before. When I got to the top of the hill, I remember hearing birds chirping and lots of frogs croaking. The forest felt alive, I guess, is what I'm saying, and I did not feel terribly unsafe, only nervous because of the possible presence of bears. As I started walking down the hill, I started whistling the Hunger Games 4-tone whistle, and as I got midway down the hill, I noticed that the birds and the frogs stopped making noise and the forest fell silent. At this point, My instincts kicked in and I knew that something was wrong. I remembered learning that the forest goes silent when there's a predator around, yet I still kept going down the hill. I was determined to know what was at the bottom of it. I was still whistling the same 4-tone whistle when I heard something whistle it back perfectly. It made the exact same sound that I made, and it sounded very oddly humanoid. Like there was a person watching me, a predator. I remember being frozen in fear, just staring at the area of forest that it came out of before turning around and walking back up the hill. When the house came into view again, I sprinted until I got inside, and I didn't leave anyone's eyesight for the rest of the night. Since then I have not had any encounters like this, and I've never been back to that area. I don't know if it was something paranormal, or if perhaps there was an actual person watching me down there. Both equally terrify me to this day. But if anyone knows of any legends from northern Michigan, from that county, then please do let me know, because I have been thinking about this a lot. So I want to preface this by saying that I've always been more of a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. I would consider myself one that leans more towards a grounded science view, and one that wants to believe but would need to experience it myself to actually believe. I'm also aware that sharing this is going to yield some amount of confirmation bias, since most here, I would assume, are going to lean towards believing. But maybe not. Who knows anyway? A bit of background. My dad's side of the family lives in a home that eventually became the place of death of my Nana. She went into hospice when her health deteriorated enough, and eventually passed peacefully in her home on the first-floor living room, in a hospice bed that was set up specifically for her. Nothing weird ever really happened after this, to my knowledge as well anyway. Fast forward to a few years back, my dad has inherited the home and has moved back from across the country with a cat, and has since adopted a second cat. Over a few years, I was able to work towards mending things with him, born of a complicated past. Just this summer, though, his health took a rapid turn and he became essentially bedridden and a fall risk, so we sort of set up a bed for him downstairs, in the same area that our Nana was in. Unfortunately, he passed just a few days ago, and I'm now grieving. He passed away, not in the home, but in the hospital. It's also important to say that he was home literally the day before, and in one day he went to the ER, and he passed away the following early morning. I've been going over daily to start sorting through important paperwork and taking care of his cats. It was tough going into the house the first time, and I always give a "Hey, Dad" greeting coming in, knowing that I won't get a reply, but it's just part of being open and vulnerable in my healing, and I did it prior to his death. And no, this story doesn't lead to hearing a greeting back or anything. But the first night there, just the prior night to sharing this, and the encounter was uneventful, but I bowled my eyes out at the foot of his bed, and pretty much every room in the house. As well, before I left, I laid in his bed downstairs, and the cats jumped up to join me for snuggles this evening. Though at 8 p.m, I went over and conducted some of the goals that I had, but when the goals were done, I did what I did the previous evening, and laid down in his bed. His 2 loving kitties joined me, and I was sending texts to my mom, and this is when it happens. So, I'm laying there, and suddenly this full-body chill just hits me. I'm in a tank top and athletic shorts, but I run hot, and I've always been very warm in the house, plus I'd been moving around a lot. Just prior to laying down, really, there was no reason to have chills anyway. I get the chills literally covered in goosebumps head to toe, hair standing at attention every inch of my body. And right at this moment, which happened within seconds, both of the cats reacted like lightning fast and raised their heads and were looking like something startled them. Chills are one thing, right? But the reaction of 2 furry friends at the exact same time, this is what really sold it for me. All 3 of us laid there. I wasn't exactly scared, and I don't scare. easy these days, but it definitely had me shocked and rattled a bit, unable to process what the heck is happening. So it's difficult to articulate the exact emotion that I was experiencing. But I started to communicate as if it was my dad telling him how much I loved and missed him then. I realized that maybe this is my Nana. Then I pretty much just said, whoever this is. The whole time, though, I felt this full-body feeling of something being there, and the cats were also still more or less focused on whatever this thing had their collective attention on one cat. Eventually got up to walk to the water ball area, and the other cat, I think, just sort of relaxed, but I still had chills everywhere after this. I got up feeling a bit uncomfortable with the realization that my world and possibly entire system of non-belief was perhaps shattered at this moment. I had chills and bumps the entire time that I brought items to my truck outside, getting ready to leave and forget something inside. I was half expecting to see something when I went back in and was on the edge, and moving a bit quicker at this point, so I said my goodbyes and departed unable to explain or rationalize any of this. I shared this with my wife as soon as I got home, and my 4-month-old as well was staring wide-eyed, looking captivated the whole time. It was actually pretty cute. I also will be sharing this with my mom and sister tomorrow, and it simply texted them saying that something happened. I can't explain, and I need to share this. But if you have any inputs or thoughts, questions, or comments, then they're all welcome. Thanks for hearing me out. I guess I'm not as skeptical anymore and think that it was either my Nana or wishfully my dad coming back to his home. And as a reminder, Nana passed away in the home, but Dad passed away in the hospital. He spent a lot of time in this very bed, though. Let me start this by saying that I've never truly believed in ghosts. I never wanted to, nor drew any interest into believing in the paranormal until me and my wife moved into our new home at the start of the year. But we live in a nice area. The house isn't too old, and we're in Michigan when we first moved in. There was absolutely no reason for us to believe that it was haunted. About 2 months went by, and we started to experience things that could be written off as natural, I guess, such as lights turning on, electronics turning on or off, or curtains moving. But we blamed it all on faulty electricity wiring or breezes and didn't think too much of it other than making a few jokes about it being haunted eventually. Though things escalated, and boy did they escalate quickly. The first big encounter that we experienced was our bedroom door slamming shut while we were watching a movie downstairs, and it was loud enough to rattle the paintings on the living room wall. So of course we ran up to check what happened when we opened the door. The bedding was off of our bed when it was originally tidy, and the curtain pole had fell off the window. We didn't think too much of this, as we believe that it fell off due to the door being slammed, since our paintings rattled downstairs as well. But I thought it was worth a mention anyway. We got spooked by this, obviously, and this would now happen regularly. It was never a different room too, always. The main bedroom, the door being slammed during the day, and at night, things being in places that we didn't leave them pillows on the floor. Before I mention this next part, though, I just want to ensure that you know that my wife has never ever experienced sleep paralysis in her entire life until one night in April, where she woke up and saw a tall figure that resembled a human, but wasn't. The figure didn't move. She described it as just standing still, watching in the corner of the room. This freaked her out enough that she woke me up, and we both had to sit and watch a movie until she could feel comfortable enough to fall asleep again. But things didn't stop there, though. They got more aggressive. I guess we haven't been physically harmed well yet, but things would be thrown, paintings dropped off of the walls, pillows thrown across the room. Again, bottles of deodorant being slammed off of walls. It's to the point where I'm mentally drained of coming home from work and knowing that there's a huge mess to clean up when I get there. So my question for all of you is, what can we do? What is this thing that is doing all of this, and why? I mean, our house isn't that old. I'd say the 60s or 70s. We live in a nice area. So why would it be haunted? I'm really hoping to get closure here. And I understand that most people won't believe anything that I've said, but we are so mentally drained at this point and we can't afford to move. So I'm desperate, please, if you can help us. I fear that things are only going to get worse from this point too, and physical. Is this a warning? Is this just getting started? Anything? Any help, please? Music. This happened in the early to mid-1980s. I was about 12 and had a group of friends that I hung out with regularly. I lived in Louisiana. There was this fad back then too to open these teen nightclubs. No alcohol, just disco music. And the same vibe as the cocaine-induced frenzy of adult disco clubs, I guess. But anyway, one was opening up. My friends couldn't stop talking about it. I hate crowds, but I was a follower in my group, so in the end I agreed to go. With everybody, one of our parents dropped us off. We paid our $2 to get in. I can see that it's super crowded. Shoulder to shoulder, I just kind of hung out around the front door debating whether or not I was gonna stay after 10 or 15 minutes pass. I get this feeling like somebody is watching me. Just an eerie sort of creepy vibe. So I just start looking around. There's a lot of people, so it's a bit like a blur. Then I notice this middle-aged guy, short brown hair, striped collared shirt. He's just staring at me like maybe he knows me or something. Well, I knew that I didn't know him, and that was my cue to leave. It was about a 5-mile walk down a well-lit, semi-busy 2-lane highway, then right, and another couple of miles down a 4-lane road into the subdivision. It's only about 8 km, and I don't have to be home till midnight, so I have time to walk it. So I take off walking, and I guess about halfway home, this car pulls up on the side of the road that I was crossing, and it's the same guy from the nightclub. My heart starts pounding, out of my chest. I mean, he creeped me out when there was like around 200 people around. I was really creeped out on an isolated side street by myself now. But he yells at me and asks if I want to ride, and I mean, it's pretty far, but to heck with that. I said no, and I kept walking. Then he yells at me, "You want to make an easy $20? And I'm dumb. I stop and ask how. He says, "Get in the car and I'll tell you," but nope, I just bolted. I took off, and I don't think I've ever run that fast in my entire life. I ran the last 3 and 1-2 miles full speed without stopping, and without looking back. I made it home, ran inside the house and straight to my room. I didn't even think to look back, since if he was following me, that if he came here, at least my dad was in the living room. At this point, I never did tell anybody about what actually happened that night. But when I think back on it, I really think that I was one dumb move away from being on a milk carton or maybe something worse. Music. Almost 10 years ago, I was in a relationship with this guy. His name was Craig, who claimed that he had a spirit that had been following him around since early childhood. According to Craig, it never caused any physical harm. It just sort of clung to him and would occasionally reveal itself in bizarre ways.